Hey everyone, welcome back to Realpolitik. Today we're going to be talking about the latest developments in Ukraine for May the 5th, 2023. So let's get right into it. All right, so in Kiev recently, very recently, a Bayraktar TB2 drone was shot down, and I will show you the footage. Let's take a look. So there it is in Kiev, and they're trying to shoot down. You can see the bullets fly by, and they got it. And I'm not going to play the sound because of copyright issues, but basically they cheer at the end. They cheer for their own drone being shot down. So yeah, it was accidentally shot down. It's a Turkish drone that the Ukrainians purchased. So that's one thing. Now the day before, yesterday, in Moscow, actually at the Kremlin, allegedly the Russians are saying that the Ukrainians they tried to assassinate Putin, and they launched, I believe, two drones hit the Kremlin, and I'll show you the footage, the various footage. There you can see the drone and the explosion near where the flag is actually. So let's take a look at another one, another video here. And actually, people have pointed out that there's one or two people on the top of the roof. And some people think this is a false flag, so the Russians did it themselves in order to get to basically make up an excuse to escalate things in Ukraine, to use more force. Because just imagine if this happened at the White House, right? Obviously there would be massive retaliation, right? But yeah, I don't know. Obviously this drone, when you look at it, it's so tiny that there's no way that it was launched from Ukraine itself, right? It was obviously launched from inside Moscow, right outside Moscow somewhere. Um, yeah, in the last few weeks, there seems to have been several attempts at hitting something in Moscow with drones. There were several drones found recently with that tried to hit something, but some of them had empty fuel tanks, so they ran out of fuel. We don't know exactly what the truth is at this point, but I don't know if this was an assassination attempt because it didn't even get close to assassinating anyone, barely even caused some damage. Maybe they were trying to damage the flag to make a point that, hey, we can strike at the heart of Moscow, and, you know, damaging the flag is kind of symbolic. Anyways, let's take a look at another video. This actually shows the aftermath. It's burning. You can see it's burning. Top of the building. Anyways, that's that. And now let's take a look at the situation in Bakhmut. So in Bakhmut, by the way, May 9th is Victory Day for the Russians. It's Veterans Day, I believe, in the US. And for the Russians, they celebrate the end of World War II when they won over Nazi Germany. But there's some analysts who believe that by that date, and today is what, the 5th? So basically, the Russians want to, I'm sure they would prefer to take all of Bakhmut, whatever remains of it. Something like 5 to 8% of it remains in Ukrainian hands. But there are analysts who believe that the Russians would like to take all of it by then, but doesn't seem like they're going to be able to do that. Anyways, let's look at another map. That was the live UA map. This is the deep state map. And with the deep state map, let's actually zoom in. And here, let's go back in time to the beginning of April. Okay. So you could see how much progress has been made since then. So I'm just going to go forward. So April 1st, we're at right now. April 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 6th. And we're just going to go forward. And honestly, this is significant progress considering that it's taken like 11 months to get to this point. And this is near the end where the Ukrainians barely control any amount of Bakhmut now, 5 to 8%. And the progress the Russians have been making has actually been it has been accelerating, right? And the reason for that is specifically because the Russians, they're now using the TOS flamethrower system as well as the FAB-500s. Now, the FAB-500s are actually yeah, this is a postage stamp, by the way, which was published a few hours after the attack on the Kremlin. Anyways, the FAB-500s, the Russians have thousands of these. These have 500 kilograms. They have a 500 kilogram payload, which is 1,100 pounds of explosives. And what the Russians do, because usually a plane would have to fly right over the target and drop it on the target. That's why it's called a dumb bomb, right? But what the Russians do is they add this glide kit to it. You see how it's kind of strapped on? And this glide kit, it has wings that how should I describe it? They kind of like pop out. And then this and it's basically a modernization conversion kit they add to it. And it lets this thing glide from 70 kilometers away. So whereas before it would have to be dropped right on the target, the jet would have to fly right above. Now it can be dropped from 70 kilometers away, right? And it's similar to the American JDAM, right? American JDAM. These are also dumb bombs, and not only now can this be dropped from far away, but it also turns it into a GPS guided gliding bomb. So from a dumb bomb, it goes from being a dumb bomb to being GPS guided, pretty precise, with a massive payload, and it can glide from 70 kilometers away. So even with if the Ukrainians their air defenses are being depleted right now, they're being significantly depleted, right? I'm going to show you that in a bit, but even if you have an air defense system that can reach that far, it takes time for the missile to get that far to 70 kilometers. In that time, I mean, the jet can just fly low, so radar can't detect it. When it gets to within range, let's say 60 kilometers, it can just fly uh, into the upper atmosphere as fast as it can, drop the payload, and then fly back down as fast as it can down to the lower atmosphere, stay low, avoid the radar. So it really gives, a lot of people are calling this a game changer. It really gives the Russians a huge advantage. But anyways, I'm going to, let's look at some footage of Bakhmut. This is the road, one of the only roads remaining. They call it the Road of Death. Let's take a look. Destroyed armor vehicle on the left, kind of like an M113, but a European one. It's called the YPG something, I forget, but there's that, and then there's this coming up. Another armored vehicle, a BMP. So yeah, I mean, this road is just littered with a bunch of destroyed armored vehicles, and I think there was supposed to be a tank in there. I didn't see it though. But here we're gonna take a look at this. This is in Bakhmut as well. And the Russians are just, they're just pounding Ukrainian positions ruthlessly, like just being turned to rubble. Like they don't care. They're just trying to wipe the Ukrainians off the map. And in regards to the TOS flamethrower, I can't show you guys this video because it would it goes against community guidelines. But basically, there's a few videos which were released recently, and they show the aftermath of a TOS flamethrower strike on Ukrainian positions, and you can just see a bunch of corpses that are littered all over the place, and they're basically they've turned into char, like they're crumpled up, and they're like there's like nothing left of them, man. It's horrifying. Um. Anyways, what else? I wanted to show you guys this one. This shows a TOS flamethrower strike on Bakhmut. You can just see the power behind those hits, right? And it just like in its wake, I mean, literally, I've heard that it gets as hot as the sun, and people, their organs, it's basically, their organs melt in the inside their body, and people just turn to like mush, or they'll turn into like a black, like you get vaporized, right? So it's just horrifying. But anyways, that's the point that it's gotten to in Bakhmut. Um, Now back to the live UA map. Um, So the weather has improved, and they're saying that the Ukrainians are going to launch probing attacks. They've launched probing attacks in Zaporizhia. Let's see. Just give me a second here. Yeah, towards Tokmak, they've launched probing attacks. So towards Tokmak, I believe here as well. Over here, Velika Novosilka, they want to cut off this salient that's sticking out. So that's what they want to do there. And Voledar, they also launched a probing attack. So this is like reconnaissance, what you call reconnaissance in combat. They're just trying to figure out, um, where all the Russian artillery is, what, how the Russians, how the Russians are going to respond, uh, how much firepower the Russians have, etc. Um, but yeah, that's that. And then there's also some very interesting footage of a few days ago, actually. In Kherson, let me just get rid of this. But here's the thing. The Ukrainians, with this upcoming counteroffensive, their main goal is going to be they basically want to cut the Russian land bridge from Crimea to the Donbass, right? They want to cut the land bridge. So they want to penetrate Russian positions with a massive armored fist. And ideally, they want to be able to establish a salient, and they want to maintain this salient at the very least. For example, Berdyansk, they're saying, is one of their top priorities, or Mariupol, maybe. And from there, they can actually easily launch artillery and rockets and HIMARS at the Kursk Bridge. If you remember last year, they struck the Kursk Bridge. Well, the Ukrainians deny it, but basically a suicide truck exploded and damaged it. There's also a ferry that goes from here to Crimea, right? But anyways, basically from Russia to Crimea. But this bridge, it's actually Putin's pride and joy. And the Russians, there was a huge retaliation afterwards. But yeah, ideally, that's what the Ukrainians want to do. They want to set up shop here, Berdyansk, and just continually bomb this bridge. That's one of their goals, right? The issue is that the Russians have set up 3 lines of defense, and I'll just show you this right here. So wait, what? Okay, where is this? Yeah. So these actually show these show all the trenches, the trench networks that the Russians have set up. So all along the front line, they set up it's a significant amount of trench networks, and specifically in the Zaporizhia area, they have really focused on setting up trenches here. And these trench networks, basically, the Russians have set up, from what I've heard, 3 lines of defense, and these include minefields. They include tank traps, so they might cover this with a tarp, cover it with some dirt, and then the tank could fall into this. And then they might even put mines in here, a motion sensor, who knows, and then the tank will just blow up. But minefields galore, tank traps. They have dragon's teeth, right? These pyramid-shaped concrete structures serve as obstacles for vehicles. If not dug deep enough, they could be removed, bulldozer to demolish with explosives. But that takes time, right? And then on top of the trenches, they also have tunnel networks that connect all the various trenches. They have pillboxes. They have ATGM ambush squads, and with the Cornet ATGM, they can actually outrange a lot of the tanks the Ukrainians are going to bring to the front. Um, the Cornet can hit a target from more than 5 kilometers away. So there's that, and there's snipers that are going to be there with armor-piercing rounds. And the Ukrainians have been practicing. For example, I saw a video a while ago, they're removing some dragon's teeth. But there's a difference between doing these kind of things in a controlled environment and then doing it in an environment where, by the way, the Russians have 10 times as much artillery, right? So you're doing it in an environment where artillery is raining down on you. You could hit a mine at any time. You could your vehicle could fall into a tank trap and blow up. And there's not going to be, like in that video, there was like a row or two of dragon's teeth. Yeah, but really, I mean, there's going to be like rows and rows of them, right? So, and if they're dug into the ground, I mean, that's going to be even more difficult, right? And yeah, it's just not going to be easy, right? My point is, it's really not going to be easy. So that's why the Ukrainians, and some analysts believe that what they would prefer to do is that they would prefer to launch an amphibious assault on Russian positions, right? And then that way they could land from behind and kind of outflank all these trenches, right? Now, of course, the Russians, you can see there's trenches everywhere here, right? So um, I think the Russians have taken everything into consideration. They have contingency plans, but still, um, some people are saying that it's going to be impossible, especially without air cover, to go through these lines of defense. The Russians are saying that basically there's no army on the planet that could go through these defenses without sustaining massive casualties, right? So, anyways, yeah, I mean, basically what it adds up to is that the Ukrainians would rather, outflank these uh, these formidable defenses. But in Kherson, actually, recently they launched kind of like a probing attack, they're calling it now. So here's the thing: the Ukrainians have launched. What am I doing? The Ukrainians have launched amphibious raids. Here, let me get rid of this. So they have launched an amphibious raid in this area in Erhodar. The Russians have control over the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe. And the Ukrainians, uh, allegedly, Boris Johnson encouraged them to do this. They launched several amphibious assaults on in Erhodar, and actually, all of them were failures. But the first one, for a long time, the Ukrainians denied this, that any amphibious assault had taken place, but later they admitted it. But basically, each time they lost hundreds of soldiers, and then they also tried launching, because the Russians, when they withdrew from Kherson, they blew up the bridges right behind them. And excuse me. So the Ukrainians, because they can't send ships from Mykolaiv for trade or otherwise, because the Russians control this peninsula you see here, so they've sent troops over here to try to take over this peninsula. Those amphibious raids failed as well. All the soldiers were killed or captured. I think they tried a few times. But basically, right now, the Ukrainians have launched probing attacks on these islands on the Dnieper River in between the Russian-controlled territory and the Ukrainian-controlled territory. And this bridge, for example, it's been blown up. But basically, the Ukrainians, yeah, they've sent troops across to these islands. Now, these islands are not inhabited. So the Russians, essentially, the reason they're not inhabited, I mean, this area in red is, but you see there's like a settlement, right? But here, there's no settlement. There's really nothing. And it's what you call a bog or a wetland. So there's a lot of vegetation. It's really the ground's really soft. You can't even dig trenches. There's water underneath. So realistically, I mean, yeah, the Ukrainians, they've tried launching amphibious assaults and landing on the Russian side, but they haven't been successful. So anyways, they've tried doing this, and honestly, the entire attempt wasn't very successful because the troops that landed here, I'll show you in a second, but the Ukrainians wanted to give them air cover, so they moved a bunch of their air defenses here, and the Russians destroyed three, some say even up to five, but I'll show you a video of three Russian S-300s destroyed, one German Gepard, however you say it, and that day wasn't a good day for Ukraine. I'll show you the video actually. So this is the S3, these are the S-300s. So we're going to take a look at the first one. Again, they moved these to the front to give their troops air cover. And here is a Lancet moving in on it. And then you can see the Lancet right there. And right there. And yeah, that's been put out of commission. So some people will say, oh, it's not that bad. But I mean, guys, come on. Like, that's done with. And this one is a massive explosion. The one next to it. So the Lancet's moving in. That was a massive explosion. Yep. And this is all on the same day. And there's a third one as well. Yeah, when it comes to these drones hitting anything, there's a lot of variables involved. The angle, the trajectory, where exactly it hits, wind velocity. But yeah, that was a good strike. Here's another S-300 on the move. So a lot of Russian sources say it was actually four, some say five. You can see there's one ahead of this, so it might have been four actually. But this video I have shows these three, and that's out of commission as well. I mean, in slow motion, you can see how significant the explosion is, right? And this Gepard was actually moved to the front to protect the S-300s precisely from Lancet drones because they're so small and hard to detect. S-300s are not really meant to take down little drones. They're meant for like jets and other missiles. So they struck the Gepard too. And this one guy online said, oh, it just needs a new paint job. But I don't think so. Um, anyways, that was on April the 27th, about a week ago. And I'll show you some pictures of the aftermath of the S-300s. I think this was the second one, I believe. Well, hopefully for the Ukrainians, it wasn't. It was the second one. Oh yeah, it's just completely annihilated. And then, aside from those S-300s, the Russians also struck a military base in Mykolaiv, and allegedly the Russians claim that what what they claim is that Mykolaiv right here. What the Russians claim is that there was a high-level meeting with Ukrainian and NATO officers, and they're saying they killed dozens of them. But yeah, let's take a look at that right here. Again, I can't play the sound for copyright purposes. Anyways, that's that. Um, and here, there's a few videos like this, but this shows how difficult it is, and it was for the Ukrainians basically move anything along those islands. This is why those islands were not inhabited by the Russians, right? Because you can't really set up shop there. I mean, you can't dig trenches and look. There's also a video of a tank getting stuck, but I mean, it's really not easy. I mean, it seems like this whole probing attack, I guess, was not very successful by the Ukrainians. But anyways, the Ukrainians retaliated the next day. They attacked an oil facility in Sevastopol. So in Crimea, Sevastopol is the Russian naval base, and the Ukrainians attacked a an oil facility. Oh, wait, that's not it. And they attacked it with a couple of drones, and the Russians say they shot down most of the drones, but some of them made it through. And an oil facility is a soft target, right? Because you hit one of those storage tanks, and the whole facility could go up in flames, which is what happened in this case. So this oil facility was being used by the Russian Navy, and this was a huge blow to the Russian Navy, right? Now, the Russians retaliated by attacking Pavlograd. And here's Pavlograd right here. Get rid of these. So the Russians, yeah, they retaliated. They attacked Pavlograd, and this was this was a chemical plant where basically they produced fuel for missiles and S-300 missiles, allegedly, and yeah, the fuel for a variety of missiles, and there was some ammo there allegedly. At first, they said it was a train station. I think they also hit a train station, but yeah, this was a massive strike. You can see, like, look at the sky. It was just a massive strike, right? So the Russians really retaliated in force. They were not happy about losing that oil refinery in Sevastopol. Anyways, here's another one from Pavlograd. You can see the explosion basically turned night into day, and that looks like a nuclear mushroom cloud. That chemical plant, I mean, for miles and miles, all the windows of every house and apartment, all the cars were just blown out. I mean, people that lived here, at first they thought it was a nuclear explosion. A lot of people just assumed that it was a nuclear bomb. The Russians had nuked them. I mean, just look at that. It's like a mushroom cloud. Turned night into day, literally. Right? So there's that. another view of Pavlograd. This is from further away, but that was a massive explosion. I don't know why he keeps moving the camera around, but yeah, okay, let's look. Let's just see. Anyways, enough of this. I think that's enough. You get the idea. And then the Ukrainians, they retaliated by targeting on a, they derailed a train. I believe it was in the Bryansk region or somewhere near the border right here. Let's see. So yeah, this shows the electrical pole. The power allegedly wasn't disrupted because there was backup power, right? You can see that. All right, so aside from that, there were the Russians during the last couple of days, they've been using the Iranian drones, the Shahed 136 or Garan 2, and they've been hitting a wide variety of targets. This is one of them. Apparently, allegedly, was a military target. Garan 2. And you can see that was something significant. And that was on May the 2nd. So all this with the S-300 strike started on April 27th. And this one was on May 2nd. And Kirovograd, let's take a look at where that is. So Kirovograd is right here. It's a different name here, but this is it. And the Russians have been targeting ever since the Ukrainians struck that oil facility in Sevastopol. They retaliated with missiles, drones, everything. I mean, they launched dozens and dozens of drones and missiles at a wide variety of targets in Dnipro and Kiev and all over the place. Kryvyi Rih. I'm just showing you guys a select few. But anyways, so yeah, another Ukrainian S-300 on that same day was destroyed by a Russian Lancet drone. Let's take a look at that. So this is at nighttime. Doesn't look like it's significant. But when you look at this, yeah, it looks like it kind of missed, but keep watching and you'll see the aftermath. See how it's smoking? So sometimes some of these strikes don't look like they're significant, but I mean, there's a lot of variables involved, like I said, and but whether there is smoke like this or not, I mean, something traveling at more than 100 kilometers an hour. I mean, the Lancet can travel at 300 kilometers an hour, I believe, and it has a 7 pound warhead, but even that 7 pound warhead at even 150 kilometers an hour. I mean, that's significant, right? And you have to consider that the FAB-500s I mentioned, it's not a seven. I mean, 7 pounds, right, for the Lancet. The Garon 2 has 70 pounds. FAB 500 has 1,100 pounds, more than a ton of explosives. So that just goes to show how deadly they are. Anyways, I'm I'm going to show you guys this because the Russians have been using these lately. This is one of the pictures of many that I've seen lately. And these are decoys they use to deplete Ukraine's air defense network. So aside from destroying all those S-300 batteries and that chemical plant that supplied S-300s with fuel, S-300 missiles with fuel, they're using these to deplete Ukraine's air defenses. And according to a leaked report, Ukraine is extremely low on missiles for their S-300, and they could be running out any time in the near future. Like some sources say within a few weeks they're going to run out. And all the S-300s that Russia's destroying lately, along with that chemical plant, it doesn't help matters, that's for sure. Anyways, let's get rid of this. So, um, the Ukrainians retaliated. They struck two oil facilities and this was just yesterday in Krasnodar and in Novoshakhtinsk. And I'll show you both of these where they are. Let's get rid of this. So I've highlighted this. So this is Novoshakhtinsk, Novoshakhtinsk, right here, close to the Ukrainian border. And this one right here, Krasnodar, it's just east of Crimea. So they've struck an oil facility in Sevastopol, and this one and another one here. So this is going to have an effect on the Russian logistics. But the Russians have retaliated by targeting Ukrainian fuel depots and their logistics. And the Russians have been targeting Ukrainian logistics for a long time. I mean, it's ongoing, right? But this could very well be a prelude to the the upcoming counteroffensive. So, anyways, let's take a look at the videos. This is Krasnodar. The Ukrainians struck this oil facility, and luckily for the Russians in this case, only one of the fuel tanks was damaged. Right? Like I said, there's a lot of variables that come into play. How full, I mean, the velocity of the drone that gets through, the angle, um, how full the fuel tank is at the time. But anyways, yeah, I mean, this was relatively minor damage. And then let's look at the Ilsky oil refinery in Novoshakinsk. And yeah, only one of the very lucky for the Russians. But I think the Ukrainians, after this, they struck this oil facility again. So the thing about it, the Russians is they have an excellent air defense network. But first of all, you can always saturate the airspace, overwhelm the air defense systems, and especially with the intel that NATO is providing Ukraine. And at the same time, what you have to understand is that no air defense system is perfect, right? Even the Saudis, they were using the American Patriot air defense systems in when they were waging a war on Yemen, and the Houthis, they used Iranian drones and they destroyed half of the Saudis' um, oil reserves at one point. So, you launch enough drones, eventually something gets through, right? There's no system is perfect, right? It's impossible. Anyways, that is that. I think there's another video I wanted to show you. So I showed you the one where yeah, let's take a look. This one, Wagner is targeting Bakhmut with the TOS. Yeah, we saw that, and let's take a look at this actually. see how the Russians are just basically annihilating anything that moves, right? Did we see this already? I think we might have, yeah. Anyways, sorry about that. Okay, so anyways, in regards to that counteroffensive, we have to ask ourselves, is it going to be successful? Right? That's what a lot of people are wondering. To sum it up, I mean, anything is possible, right? But I would assume that the odds this time are not in Ukraine's favor. Why do I say that? Because the Ukrainians don't have a numerical advantage this time around. When they attacked Kharkiv, the Ukrainians had an advantage, numerical advantage of 5-1, something like that. Some say even more, right? And they had a lot of volunteers or mercenaries, whatever you want to call them. There's footage of that. So the Russians were they were extremely outnumbered. Um, Now, why did that happen? Well, as a lot of you know, the Ukrainians from day one they mobilized. So when Russia launched their attack all along the front, the Ukrainians mobilized. And fast forward 6 months, the Russians, they assumed that everything would be over in a few weeks. So all of their professional soldiers were signed up for no more than 6 months. Now, 6 months comes around, and from February 22nd, when the war started, to late August, early September, that's when the counteroffensive took place, because that's when a lot of the professional soldiers, Russian soldiers, their contracts ended and they opted out. A lot of them opted out. They were told it was going to be a cakewalk, a walk in the park, and it wasn't. They saw a lot of their comrades die. A lot of them felt like they've been lied to, so a lot of them opted out, and that left a huge gaping hole right here in the Kharkiv region, Izium, and I recall it all started in Balakleya, right? Right. That's the first time when the Ukrainians that was a breakthrough for them, and then from there they just spread everywhere and went north. And in a week, it was all over. They took everything. But basically, um, that's basically that's the reason why the Ukrainians they went from having 400,000 soldiers, right? They ballooned all the way up to 1 million. And in the beginning, there were people lining up. There were lineups of volunteers for the Ukrainians. And unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. There's a lot of footage. I'm not going to show it, but there's a lot of footage of people being dragged off the streets. Um, so it doesn't. So those days are gone, where when there those the lineups of people that doesn't exist anymore. I've seen videos of recruitment officers, Ukrainian recruitment officers, and nightclubs, ski resorts, you name it, right? Some people say even funerals, but anyways, yeah. So the Ukrainians, they're having to basically hand out they're having to send recruitment officers out on the streets and hand out summon papers to people, right? So they seem to be low on personnel. But back then, they went from around 400,000. And Zelensky said 1 million, but analysts believe the million figure includes police and whatnot. So closer to 600 to 800,000. The Russians, on the other hand, they uh, they start out with what 200,000 around there. I think the State Department at one point said the Americans said at one point, was it the Pentagon or State Department? I don't recall, but they said it was something like 170 to 180,000 realistically. Now, after all the casualties and after all the professionals left, and this area was only guarded by LPR troops, LPR militia, Luhansk People's Republic, just militia, not super well trained, not elite. And the Russians went from like what 180 around there to something like 140, 150. So, think about it, 150 compared to like 600 to 800,000, right? That's not the case anymore though, because the Russians have mobilized. And the Ukrainians, like I said, they no longer have endless lineups of people wanting to join. So right now, according to most analysts, the Russians and Ukrainians are they more or less have the same number of troops. Some analysts believe the Russians even have more. It seems that the Russians certainly have more tanks. The Americans have stated that they've trained up to 9 brigades. At full strength, that would be 45,000 troops. But yeah, the Ukrainians don't have the numerical advantage. And yeah, they're receiving a bunch of tanks. They're receiving Leopard 2 tanks and Challenger tanks, but not that many of them. The most common tank they're receiving is going to be the Leopard 1. And the thing is, the training. The Ukrainian tankers only have something like, if for the Leopard 2s, it's like 5 weeks of training, and it's supposed to be 3 to 6 months, right? So, whereas the Russian tankers, they have, 6 months or, years of training, but the mobilized Russian soldiers that mobilized late last year, they've had more than 6 months to train, right? So the Ukrainians, a lot of them who have been sent to UK, Canada, Germany, they've only trained for, like 6 weeks or so of training, and then they're sent back. Now might have had prior training, but still, they don't have the numerical advantage. Um, they've gotten some newer tanks, but they haven't trained as much as they should for those tanks. The Russians have significant lines of defense. In terms of logistic, I think this meme pretty much sums it up. I mean, you've got all these different tanks, and all use different kinds of ammunition, all have different kinds of engines or transmissions. It says Ukrainian armored vehicle repair specialist, and he's like, oh man. Because look, the Leopard 2 and the Abrams use the same kind of ammunition, right? 120 millimeter smoothbore. The Challenger uses 120 millimeter NATO rifled, so it's different. The AMX uses proprietary 105 millimeter. The Leopard 1, it's not even showing, but that uses 105 millimeter a NATO round, and that's going to be the same as so Leopard 1 and the T55, it's not showing. They're going to be a rifled round, 105 millimeter, so they're going to use the same. Then you got all the T72, 64, 80, 62. They all use the same ammunition. But then you got the Bradleys and the Strikers and the BMP 1s and 2s, and all of them use different kinds of ammunition. Now, don't get me wrong. There are armies that, have a lot of different kinds of armored vehicles and tanks, but the main thing is it takes time, right? And the Ukrainians don't really have that time. In terms of firepower, also, the Russians, they're firing 10 times as much artillery shells as the Ukrainians. And also, the Russians they don't have air superiority, like complete control of the air. But when it comes to the air, the Russians, their troops have air cover, right? Where the Ukrainians, like I said, their S-300s are being depleted. And the Russians have recently introduced the FAB-500 into the mix. So anything could happen. Look, the Ukrainians could break through, but definitely the odds are going to be against them. Anyways, guys, that's it for today. For all of you who have watched till the end, thank you very much. Please like and subscribe. Comment if you disagree with anything, if you like the video, and share with your friends. Anyways, thank you, and I will see you guys in the next one.